So our objectives for the survey are to capture this knowledge and reach out to companies and individuals across the country, also internationally, and look at timelines, look at interactions with the agency, talk about or try to capture challenges that people have with the process, identify bottlenecks, so pretty much what Josh already outlined and performed with his study, but not do it from a company perspective, but from those that actually work on an individual basis as professionals within companies. To date, or we started back in August of this year with 80 expert interviews across the country, looking at very small companies, large companies, different sectors of the industry, therapeutic technologies, diagnostic technologies. We talked to FDA, we talked to actually persons that were deeply involved with the legislation of 510K. Peter Hutt was one of our interviewees who wrote the legislation back in the mid-70s. And based on those 80 expert interviews, the survey that is now online actually evolved. And all of the panelists helped us and were part of those experts, and I see a couple of people in the audience, so thanks for your contribution to that process. We had 2 rounds of expert review to identify the topics and questions that are most relevant for discussion. And the survey, which resulted from it, takes about 60 minutes to complete, 86 questions, and is online now at www.510k.net. I will get back to it later in the end. By the end of January, we'll have the data in, and probably we'll try to do a first analysis and get it to the IOM committee, if possible, before they finalize their report, and then by April publish our results. The survey elements, we capture demographic info to be able to look at OUS versus US experience, for example, companies from outside the United States, to look at the experience level of those that have submitted 510Ks, to look again at different industry sectors. We captured predictability questions, interaction with FDA, clearly timelines and guideline questions, process issues, also an international comparison as part of that process element of the survey. And the first elements here are all non-device specific, so they capture the experience of the people for the last 3, 5, 10 years that have seen the process evolve. And then we have one last section with 34 questions, which captures the very last submission that got a decision by FDA, and we're capturing timelines again for the specific device and the nature of exchange with the agency. Respondents should have submitted, or that's one of the requirements, should have submitted a 510K within the last 3 years. Participation is anonymous. Time required, again, roughly 60 minutes, and we hope for broad participation from all sectors of the industry. A number of professional societies are actually supporting us in the outreach, including the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society reps. And the survey is accessible at 510k.net. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan, and thanks to all of our presenters for providing these valuable descriptions of their work. If you haven't seen any of these studies, you can access them by visiting the resources section of the site that Jan just referenced. And while you're there, take the survey. And that's, again, www.510k.net. So we've set aside most of our time here this afternoon to have a discussion about some of the issues that are raised by these studies. And just to give it some structure, I've put these into various pieces. And we'll start with some of the issues and questions. These are very generic thinking point questions about the nature of the criticism that has come in about the 510K process. And I want to start by throwing this open first to Bill, because Bill, you alluded to some of the variety of people and types of people who have had concerns about the 510K process. What do we know about the incoming information that sort of led the agency down this path to deeper and deeper concern?
Well, I think many of us are aware of the public attention that the 510K program generated over the last several years. with, as I alluded to, I think complaints on both sides, complaints that the process was broken on the industry side because we weren't providing a good enough service for industry. We weren't predictable. We weren't transparent enough. There was a perception that we weren't permitting important innovative therapies to reach the market in a timely fashion, and that's for a public health person, that's concerning. At the same time, there were arguments on the other side that we were letting things through without rigorous enough data, without enough evidence. And so I think appropriately the decision was made to take a hard look at the program and see, are these accusations accurate? Are these concerns accurate? And so there was a two-pronged approach, an independent review from the Institute of Medicine and a thorough internal review, and I think that's where we are today.
Josh, did your surveys give you a sense of who is saying what? Were there your survey captured the information mostly from industry, but right. Do you also have a sense that patient organizations, patient advocacy organizations are concerned?
That wasn't the intent, really. I mean, that's a good question. I'm not aware of any kind of anything other than anecdotal concerns before a lot of the work that's going on right now in my survey. I think that it was mostly focusing on the question of how widespread are the concerns from industry with respect to the overall. We're not just talking about the 510K process. Actually, it's processes overall, and really looking at the impact in innovation overall. So, from my perspective, I think, and from reading the lines between those that participated in the survey, most would believe that the 510K process was actually working fairly well. There were pockets of issues and things from a process standpoint with regard to the 510K process that probably had room for improvement. But I would say that overall, the perspective was that the 510K process was doing its job. Mm-hmm. And I think that, Ralph can comment, but with regard to safety, it appeared that the safety track record is actually pretty good as well.
Yeah, the safety concerns seem to trump everything. Is that really the most serious issue that's driving a lot of the concern for reform? Ralph, we can comment on that.
I think when you think about reasons to change any system, the 510K system, at least as I've thought about it, they fall into three broad buckets that obviously overlap a bit. One is, are unsafe products getting on the market? And that's the issue that I primarily looked at, and I have another study I'm starting to do that in more detail. The other is inefficient processes. And Josh, I think, spent a lot of time on that. And the third is, are we putting too high a barrier to getting new products out there onto the market? One of the challenges that I think we have here is that the 510K system, unless you live in it, doesn't make a lot of sense when you try to explain it to somebody. Has anybody actually read Section 510K of the statute? I mean, seriously, have you read it? It has nothing to do with anything we're talking about. And when you talk to newspaper reporters, congressional staffers, whomever, the system, the structure is hard to understand. And frankly, all of us on all sides have done a bad job in educating people about this. And so you get this safety concern because people say, oh, gee, this means that the same technology in 1976 is all we're getting today. Well, that's not true. Oh, this doesn't look at safety. That's not considered by the agency. Wrong. The agency does consider safety, obviously. So we've had a lot of misunderstanding out there that I think has led to concern by responsible people because the system is not easy to understand and we haven't explained it well.
And I think related to that is a belief or kind of a layman's understanding that the 510K process doesn't permit clinical trials, which is also not true. There are many clinical trials that are done for 510K processes, 510K products before they're cleared. So that was another misunderstanding. So I agree. There is a lot of misunderstanding in the public, perhaps even in Congress, about what the 510K process is. And you're right that there is a need for better education about what it actually is and the benefits of it.
Jan, it's a little premature to talk about the results of your survey, but you had 80 interviews, some 80 interviews with experts in the field. Did you get a sense from them of different areas of concern that they thought were most important, and how did you go about building those into your survey?
Well, the structure that we finally chose with predictability, interaction, and process, or general process questions, is pretty much the result of that exchange with experts. And predictability clearly is of concern to everyone involved with developing and commercializing medical devices. And I think, taking a step back, there is a notion or a question whether systemic changes of the process are needed, or whether just an improvement of the implementation of the current process is needed. And hopefully all of our studies can contribute in a constructive way to an improvement.